Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Glad you could be here with me. Today I'm doing my recap for Lovecraftober. So if you remember a few weeks back, I did my Lovecraftober video where I talked about books that I am planning to read for spooky season, for the Halloween month. And so today I'm going to give you a little bit of a recap on that. If you haven't watched that video, it's totally okay, and if you want to watch it, I'll leave it linked at the end of the video. But this is just going to kind of let you know where I went with that and what my thoughts were. And so yeah, let's get right to it, and stay till the end of the video because I'll talk about a couple of other things. Okay, I read 4 H.P. Lovecraft stories during the month of October, and 1 bonus story that's not written by Lovecraft but was inspired by Lovecraft. So I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I was really impressed with H.P. Lovecraft's writing. And this was my first time ever reading an H.P. Lovecraft story. I'm familiar with Lovecraft. I'm familiar with a lot of his monsters. You know, I've seen a lot of videos and read about a lot of the lore and things, but I never actually read the stories before. And I had a 1 volume on my shelf. I've had it for a long time. That I found at a used bookstore, and it's the complete fiction of H.P. Lovecraft. So I figured, why not? I will pick it up and enjoy some Lovecraft for October. So the first story that I read was The Call of Cthulhu, and it follows a gentleman who's been told about these mysterious artifacts that are popping up. It's a little statuette that seems to be worshipped and revered, and he starts looking into all the lore behind the cult that has sprung up, the cult of Cthulhu, pretty much, and just all the horrors that he discovers along the way of researching this cult and finding out what it's all about. And it's very low-key. It's not in-your-face creepy. It's not really scary or frightening, but it's got a very subtle unease to it. And that's what I would say about all the Lovecraft stories that I read. They leave you with a very uneasy feeling very unsettled. But it's not necessarily out and out frightening. With the exception of one of the stories, it was a little more frightening than some. So I'll go into that here in a few minutes. But The Call of Cthulhu was really good. It's really the standard where H.P. Lovecraft introduces the Cthulhu mythos, and most people, when they think H.P. Lovecraft, they think of Cthulhu, and when they think of Cthulhu, they think of this story. And if you're not familiar with the lore, Cthulhu is a monster who lives at the bottom of the sea. He's sometimes called the Dreaming King or the Sleeping King, and he's been asleep for who knows how many millennia under the sea. He came to this world originally eons ago, and he has wings on his back, and he has kind of the body like a humanoid body, but he has the head of a squid and tentacles for his beard, you know, that kind of stuff. Really cool looking creature. Just like one of my favorite creatures that I've ever seen pictures of and read about. Most definitely Cthulhu takes the cake. But the story in itself is unsettling, disturbing at times, but not overly frightening. So I really enjoyed the story though, and I would definitely read it again. One thing that I'm struck by with H.P. Lovecraft is he is a master of first-person narrative. In all of the stories I read, and I'll get to the others shortly, but in all the stories I read, it was written in a first-person perspective. You've got a narrator reenacting or recounting to you the things that he's encountered, or the things that he's heard about. And so in each of these cases, the main character is H.P. Lovecraft taking on the character of a person who is actually there. So really, really good. I'm not usually a huge fan of first-person narratives. There are a few exceptions, like the Dresden Files, and definitely H.P. Lovecraft's work. So, The Call of Cthulhu was the first story I read. The second story I read was The Dunwich Horror. And this takes place in a small town called Dunwich. And there's this child that's born, and under mysterious circumstances, and his parents are known to be occultic worshippers, if you will, and they perform all these strange incantations and rites on this slab up in the mountainside. And all of a sudden this child is born, and the child begins to grow at alarming rates. He at one point he was a teenager, and yet he was the size of a full-grown man with a full beard and everything like that. Just really completely different from any other child you would expect. And there's rumors that he was not the offspring of his human father, but was kind of the offspring of something else. And there are weird goings on in the shed outside their house. They've got it all boarded up, and the child has a room of his own where all these strange goings on keep happening, and the cattle keep disappearing, and just something seems to be feeding on them, and the family keeps buying more and more cows at an alarming rate, and they're paying for it with these weird gold pieces that nobody really knows where they came from. And so that one was definitely unsettling in parts. And the child, who's not really a child, full-grown man at the age of a teen, keeps looking for the Necronomicon, which is this book of esoteric wisdom that's supposedly come down from supernatural means. And he's trying to get his hands on this to perform some rites and learn these incantations. And at one point in the story, everything just comes to a climax, and it just, wow, it was freaky what happened. Again, not super frightening or scary, but it was definitely unsettling. H.P. Lovecraft is the master of the unsettling, it seems. The third story I read was The Shadow over Innsmouth, and it's about a guy who he's going to visit some family, and he ends up deciding to make a stop along the way in the small town of Innsmouth, where all these strange goings-on are supposedly happening. When he first talks to a guy to buy his bus ticket, the guy keeps telling him about all this weird and unique stuff that happens in Innsmouth, and tells him, oh yeah, you should go check it out. Be an interesting place for you to stop on the way, even though most people completely avoid the town of Innsmouth. And he goes there, and he realizes that a lot of the people there don't look completely like normal human beings. Their eyes never blink, they never shut. They've just got this weird demeanor about them, and there's this strange cult that has completely taken over the religious centers in the town. And It is just really, really strange what begins to happen upon his arrival. He immediately begins to see for himself what is going on in the town, and all the freaky things begin to happen. He begins to talk to some of the townspeople, one guy in particular who everybody says is crazy, but he goes and talks to him anyway and finds out all this really freaky stuff. And it just progresses from there. And I'll tell you, of all the stories I read, this one had the weirdest ending. And I mean weird. I don't want to spoil the ending. You have to read it. I highly recommend that you read The Shadow over Innsmouth. I recommend the others too, but this one especially, if you want something unsettling and just gotta make you have this weird feeling in your gut, in the pit of your stomach, and all of a sudden just this really strange ending that came out of the middle of nowhere, and you're like, whoa, I did not see that coming. How does that even happen? It's uncanny the way the story ended. So you definitely need to read that one. The final one I read was At the Mountains of Madness, and this one was really, really, really good. As far as the overall storyline, I think, at least for me personally, it had the best storyline of all of the stories I read from H.P. Lovecraft. It was longer, which probably helped with that, but you'll hear a lot of people talk about how a lot of H.P. Lovecraft stories leave them wanting more, and I think that's because so many of them are just so short. But this one was longer. It was a little over 80 pages long, and he was able to give a more complete and fleshed out story with that one, I think, and he was able to give it more of a satisfying ending that way too. And the story takes place on an expedition to the Antarctic regions. They've got all this fancy equipment, and they're going to do some digging to unearth some hopefully really precious and unique ores that they can use to determine some of the history behind Earth and what happened with the Earth during its prehistory, things of that nature. So you've got some archaeologists and some scientists that go out, and they're propelling themselves into the Antarctic. They've got some aeroplanes that they're flying into more of the deeper parts, and they set up drills and everything, and they end up unearthing some stuff that they probably shouldn't have unearthed. And as they go deeper, they find these giant mountains with huge peaks and cloud cover surrounding them. And on the other side, they find this seemingly abandoned relic of civilization that has many different layers to it. And they go into the subterranean depths, and they're studying all these maps and drawings and ancient writings. And what they find down there is something that they never probably would have ever wanted to find. And again, I won't spoil it for you, but you want to read this story. I highly recommend this one as a must read as well. And a lot of people talk about this one, and there's good reason for it. So yeah, At the Mountains of Madness, the ending was really, really good, and it's just really, this one out of all of them probably had me on my seat, just really anxious and stressed about what was going to come next. It's like, oh my gosh, what are we going to find out? So yeah, H.P. Lovecraft is really, or was really, a master of his craft, and his stories really do stand the test of time. They've aged very well, or at least most of them. I don't know that The Shadow over Innsmouth necessarily aged well, but it was really, really captivating. And they're all kind of a little bit like that. So highly, highly recommend these. And then the final book that I read was not H.P. Lovecraft, but it was inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. And that is The Ballad of Black Tom. And it follows Charles Thomas Tester. He's a young black man in 1920s New York. And he is very poor. He and his father are both very poor. His father's in poor health. And Tommy, which is what he's known to a lot of people by, Tommy Tester, and he sits on street corners. He will beg for alms. He'll sing some songs for people, and just a really, really unique fellow. He also does some odd jobs on the side for different people, kind of as a carrier. He'll procure some rare artifact or rare book for other people and take it to them, and he's known for his ability to be very hush-hush about the whole matter. So people like using his services for that, and he makes a little extra money with that. And he's able to care for his aging father. And so that part of the story, it really brings you into Tommy's world to see what he has to deal with, and it really puts a strong light on race relations, especially at that time period when black people were just very, very looked down upon. They still are today, unfortunately, but even more so back then, and the things that they had to go through, and the painful moments, and being looked at funny if you're riding on the train, which is an all-white train, and you're the only black person. It was just so heart-wrenching to see that brought to light, but it was brought to light very vividly by this author, and the author's name is Victor Lavelle. And this was a reread for me. I just really, really wanted to reread it. It had been a while since I'd read it, and I'm really glad I did, because I realized I'd forgotten a lot of it. But so one day Tommy's sitting on a street corner, and he's playing his songs, and a gentleman walks up to him. He's obviously very well to do. He's wearing a fine suit and a hat, and he gives Tommy some money to come to a party and play for his guests. And long story short, he ends up going to the party, and he arrives early, a day early actually, and he gets some one-on-one time with this unique gentleman, mysterious gentleman actually, and he goes into this certain room, and this weird stuff starts happening, and he finds out that this man has become part of a mystery religion or a mystery cult. And so it scares him off at first, but then he eventually goes back because he knows the money will be good, and there's something about this man that just really draws him in. And something cataclysmic happens to Tommy Tester, and he eventually decides to call himself Black Tom, and he becomes known and feared in the community. His look is completely changed. He wears a fine suit and a walking cane and a hat, and he does things for this gentleman that he met. And it all becomes this story about a man who was once so down on his luck and so looked down upon for being a black man, and he was thought to be dangerous by everybody that came across him, and so he decided to prove them right. And it's an amazing book, and to see his transformation is just frightening. I mean, if you want a creepy book, forget all the Lovecraft stories I just told you. Focus on this one. But it was just very, very well done. It's very well written. It's only about 120 pages, so it's a quick read. I reread it in the matter of probably about 4 hours. It was that quick a read. So I highly, highly recommend The Ballad of Black Tom to you. And with that being said, that's the end of my Lovecraftober reading. And I hope you really enjoyed that. If you read some of these stories already, let me know what your thoughts were in the comments. And if you're more interested to read them now, let me know that too. Or maybe you're not interested at all. I'd love to know why. I just, I couldn't get enough of these stories, and hopefully I'll be able to read more H.P. Lovecraft down the road. But yeah, so that sums that up. In my future videos, I know the year is coming to a close. I'm going to have some really interesting videos for you, hopefully, coming up soon. I plan to give you a window into my plans for the remainder of the year. 2020 has been kind of a weird year for reading, so I'm going to give you an update as to where I'm at and where I plan to go with it. I'm about halfway through The Wastelands by Stephen King, so I hope to have a review for that one up for you soon. And that pretty much completes that, guys. Overall, I'm not going to give a dragon rating to all the stories that I read, but my overall experience for Lovecraftober was a 5 dragons out of 5. You heard me right, 5 dragons. And I hope you will pick some of these stories up and read them and enjoy them as much as I did. And with that being said, guys, make sure you do all this stuff here on the screen to help support my channel. You can click the description below to see more information about some of what I shared here on my channel today. If you want to support what I do here, outside of just doing all the, clicking the like and everything like that, you can support me on Patreon, and I'll have the link in the description below so that you can make sure and check out my Patreon. And I think that's it, guys. Make sure that you are reading more books, and I will talk to you in my next video. Take care. Bye.